In this video, I'm gonna tell you how often you should really be changing your fishing line. So when I first started driving a car, I heard you should change your oil every 3,000 miles. Now when I looked in the manual of my car, it actually said you should change it every 5,000 miles. When I first started fishing, I heard something similar. You should change your fishing line every 6 months. And that sounded kind of crazy to me because fishing line can get expensive really fast. And after fishing a few years, I pretty much figured out the truth. Now tournament anglers and fishing guides, this video isn't for you. You guys make money on finding and catching fish. It is more important for you to have fishing line that is good to go, perfect every time. This is more for your weekend warrior, your average angler who just wants to go out, have fun, catch fish. Now here's when you should really start replacing your line. If you start noticing nicks and kinks in your line, especially deep in the spool, that's a good indicator that your line has gotten pretty brittle and old and is damaged, even from fishing out deep, or even running your line over wood, stumps, rocks, things like that can damage your line, especially mono and fluoro. This is specifically for mono and fluoro. If you have a few feet with cuts and nicks and things like that, that's no biggie, you can cut that off. But if it's really deep in the spool, you're gonna wanna consider replacing all that fishing line. But if when you're casting, you're noticing nicks and kinks down your line, you're seeing all this damage, it's a good sign it's time to replace it. Another thing to look for is if your fishing line is getting very brittle. Now what I mean by brittle is a little bit more dried out. It breaks easy, it rips easy. When you cinch your knots, a line breaks very easily. That's a good sign it's time to replace your line. Mono and fluoro should be somewhat soft and bendable. Specifically mono has a lot of stretch, so it shouldn't be brittle. If that's happening with your mono, with your fluoro, it's probably time to replace your fishing line. Another thing to look for, especially if you're fishing braid, is you should replace your fishing line if you start noticing a lot of frays, like little hairs, wispies coming off of your fishing line. That means your braid is starting to fall apart. Sometimes you can get away with removing a few feet, but most times you're probably gonna have to get rid of all of it depending on how deep that fray goes down the spool. The way braid works, it's several strands that are twisted together, and when it starts to fray, it essentially starts opening that braided line. So it's a good sign you probably need to replace your fishing line. And then of course, you should replace your fishing line if your spool is too low. There is hardly any line left on this spool. You can tell by looking right there, there's a big gap in there. That's gonna affect your casting distance more than memory. The last thing you want is hooking into something big and it spools you and then breaks you off because you didn't have enough line. Some folks might just tie on more line onto this existing line, and that's fine, you can do that. Personally, I just replace it all because that's just another point in where it can break. Let me know how often you swap out your fishing line in a comment down below. And if you wanna learn how to tie your fishing line to your fishing reel, you can click on the video right here. Happy fishing and God bless.